there was plenty of fallout from this whole Crowder thing. And of course, a lot of it has to do with right wingers, complaining that they can't mainstream gay bashing anymore. Why can't I make money off of this? Says Steven Crowder. And here is Ben Shapiro coming up with his angle on how to whine about this. Ben Shapiro from the Ben Shapiro Show.
Well, he referred to Carlos Maza as a queer. Okay, so the reason that I'm saying the word is because I'm not sure exactly what the context is for when this is appropriate. Like Carlos Maza calls himself queer, but if Steven Crowder says the word queer, then it's obviously some sort of insult according to Carlos Maza. So I'm not sure what the rules are because the rules change every 5 seconds.
There you go. Ben Shapiro pretending that context has no meaning whatsoever.
Oh,
right?
Well,
that is the subtext, not barely even subtext of all of those people. I mean, what unites Ben Shapiro, Sam Harris is subtext is a thing that doesn't, or context is a thing that doesn't exist.
Right. Just the word itself, queer.
It's just the word. You just say the word.
It's the word, as if the word is wrong.
I mean, what's amazing is you could think of even a continuum that's like, it's not only is it not one word, it's not even two things, like the difference between someone self-identifying and then someone else being a bigot. There's people who use it ironically. There's people who use it in a satiric context. There's people who use it in an objective description of something. There's people who use it when they're quoting somebody else. I mean, even that binary doesn't cover a word, let alone just, oh, well, the word is queer.
Of course.
Of
course.
Jesus
And
Christ.
adults understand this.
Yes.
Adults understand this. I mean, there's a myriad of different ways you can use the word Jew.
Right.
And with some measure of context, you understand I can't use it in this way. I'm not going to walk up to, I'm not going to go up, and purchase a ticket for, a movie and dress the ticket counter, person as, sweetheart or honey in the way that I would maybe, my, a girlfriend
landlord.
or a wife or something. Or, I wouldn't say this to my landlord. I mean, the context matters. The relationship between the people matters.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say Ben Shapiro does understand that.
I suspect he does.
Yeah, of course.
I suspect
That's the
he
whole
does,
hustle.
and he's just lying. But
That's the whole game, in my view.
The idea that somehow, I mean, this is the same thing like, hey, black people use the N-word in rap songs.
They use it
Now
all
I don't
the
know,
time.
am I allowed to use it or not? Give me a break. Give me a break.
Black people were slaves, and that word has a much longer history of, queer was used to describe people that were, just fun, interesting, different.
Unbelievable.
Rules change every 5 seconds.
All right. Here is another version of the defense of, or I had a defense of Steven Crowder.
Definitely
as much
not
as it
a
is.
defense of Steven
It's
Crowder.
not a defense of Steven Crowder, but it is a defense of the idea that somehow it is unfair. Now, look, there is a solution to this. And there's only one solution to it as far as I can tell. Because you cannot, are we going to have, stores where, where people are, let's say at restaurants, that people can come in and walk up to patrons and start yelling at them because they're black, or start yelling at them, period? No, we don't allow that. If it's some type of political protest even, which I wouldn't necessarily criticize the protest, but you can't expect that the protesters are going to be then allowed to sit down and eat. No, they're going to get kicked out of the restaurant. There are terms of service. The problem that we have with Google and with Facebook is they are too concentrated in their power. And so they become too important in the context of our society. no one is going to let me on to Fox News and get paid. Why is that? That is not censorship. That is not censorship. Here is Glenn Greenwald on Tucker Carlson's program. Tucker Carlson has lost another advertiser. Bayer apparently is no longer advertising on Tucker Carlson's show. That is not censorship. Here is Greenwald and Tucker Carlson.
He joins us tonight. Glenn, thanks so much for coming on. So you don't have to be a fan of Steven Crowder or anyone to see this as a threat to one person's speech is a threat to all of our speech, is it not?
Pause it. Now, here is where this thing goes off the rails, because there is no threat to this one person's speech. Steven Crowder hasn't even been deplatformed from YouTube. He is just not allowed to monetize his channel until he gets rid of all the gay bashing. That's it. That is it. So this is already not even a false equivalency. It's simply a false story. That is all that's here. Now, you can extrapolate it to other people who may not be able to make who have been deplatformed from these, from YouTube. They can go on to find other platforms. They're not as prominent, which is a problem with YouTube and concentration of this power. But this is not about free speech. He has his speech. He can make it. Continue.
Yeah, I mean, I personally find Steven Crowder to be just a contemptuous cretin as a commentator. I do think he's an infantile bully and bigot, which are not words I easily invoke. He didn't just criticize Carlos Maza. He mocked him for being gay and for being Latino. He used a lisp and things to ridicule him, sent a lot of harassment his way. But that's the point, Tucker, is that censorship advocates want our brains to only go to that most primitive first level of, do we hate this person, and are we therefore glad that they're being censored, without thinking about the framework being endorsed or the consequences that ensue from it. I mean, it resonates a lot for me because I've dealt with harassment far greater than what Carlos Maza is complaining of. I'm a gay man in a country, Brazil, that just elected a president driven by intense anti-gay animus. My husband's a member of Congress in the oppositional party. We've been mocked and derided with our sexual orientation, not by random YouTubers, but by the president of the country himself on Twitter, and his family members who are elected members of Congress. And it would never occur to me to run to social media companies to beg for censorship, because in part it's just something that comes with the territory of being a public figure. But more
pause
so
it,
because
pause it. This analogy is not apt, because Steven Crowder is not being censored. Now, I think there's an argument that Bolsonaro is breaking the terms of service of Twitter and shouldn't be allowed to use this that broadcast apparatus for that. But that's a completely separate argument. Steven Crowder can go on and be a homophobe and bash gay people all he wants on YouTube right now. He can do that every day. Every part of his show could be that. He just can't make money off it. Or at least not in that context. He can say, become a member of the Mug Club.
Well, to be
But
fair,
this is,
a lot of people do want him kicked off completely.
well, that's fine. But that's not what has happened. And there's no reason why people can't have the opinion of having him kicked off completely. I mean, frankly, it seems to me to be within YouTube's rights to do that as it's structured now. So if people want to go on and make a criticism about this, it is we have allowed YouTube to get too big. Because what is the alternative? Where do you draw the line? What can you not do on YouTube? I mean, really, like, why can't you talk about, just pedophilia?
We have to be really careful with these analogies, though. So I don't agree with the look. No, YouTube isn't Fox News. It would be banning somebody. It's analogous to, and one of the reasons it's so important to break up and the public value is so significant, not just for independent people who actually make a living on it, but also for consumers, it would be analogous to saying not just you can't use a particular cell phone provider, but you can't use a phone, period. I mean, the reality is that these are massive public commons that are in private hands, which is a structural threat to us. And as long as you have incompetent, profit-driven private companies determining these things, it's a problem and a threat, regardless of what terminology you use. That is the bigger story here. So I agree.
Yes,
I just want to know.
It's
just really important to use really precise and smart analogies.
Yeah, I'm being very I'm criticizing
you
both
think
of these
YouTube
guys.
is this not?
Hold on.
Taking off of YouTube is the same as not doing a hit on Fox. You honestly think that? Really?
Well, wait a second. You want to use all of cable news? You can't walk.
No.
off
All
the street
of streets, water, phones, public communication.
No.
It's a public utility.
I'm saying, listen, if you want to say it's a public utility, then go on and make that case.
That's the case I'm making.
These guys are not making these case because it's not a public utility.
That it is a danger to have the hands of so concentrated in Silicon Valley of who makes these decisions.
Wait a second.
Agree.
No. All I'm hearing is YouTube shouldn't censor it. I'm not hearing from either one of these guys that what needs to happen is YouTube needs to be broken up. YouTube needs to be regulated. All I'm hearing is that there's a censorship going on here. The word censorship is wrong. It's not accurate at all. They both know it. He is on. That is the reality. If he gets deplatformed, the answer isn't you're going to let anybody go on this platform to say anything. Because if you're going to allow gay bashing on there, what are you not going to allow and why?
Well, they're taking it as a given that YouTube has this much control over the market and that that's not going to change anytime soon, I think.
Well, okay. All right. So take it as a given. I want to know what they will keep off there and why.
What Glenn Greenwald and Tucker Carlson would keep off there? They would keep well, look, Carlson I don't trust. I think Greenwald is like Chomsky. I think he's a free speech absolutist. So I think the only things that he would take off would be actual depictions of actual occurring violence, and that's it. And that's his view.
But maybe like some insane.
Well, wait. Why would you keep depictions of actual violence off?
What do you mean? You don't.
Why would you do that?
You don't. I mean, you understand obviously the difference between speech and violence. I mean, first of all, I'm not going to defend Greenwald's. That I don't have the same strength of position he has on that, but there's obviously a difference between, as an example, do you think an al-Awlaki speech inciting or talking about jihad is the same as a beheading video? If you think it's the same, then we're in different planets. I don't agree with that. That's a crazy analogy to me.
If I don't have to think that either one of those is sufficient to be kept off of YouTube.
Well, no. You asked where Glenn would draw the line, and I said I think the free speech
a
position
depiction
would
of
be
violence.
No. Actual violence would be like a video of a beheading, but I don't think he would take down the al-Awlaki video. No, that would be a strong free speech position.
Why would you take down a video of
Well,
a
I'm
beheading?
not telling you what I think the line is, and that's a pretty obvious line for people who take those things strongly.
Instead of you trying to tell me what Glenn's line is, what would be your line?
Well, you asked me.
Okay, what would be yours?
Well, look, I'm trying to foreground the bigger problem here, which
I
is
understand.
No,
I agree.
Let me finish the thought. Let me finish the thought.
We started the show that way.
I'm sorry.
We started the show that way.
Right. I think that what he's emphasizing is important. I've said before. Well, look, here's what I've said. I'll say it again. I guess I said it yesterday. One is I think under the YouTube terms of service, absolutely, Crowder's in violation of them. So this isn't even a question. And if you're a YouTube provider, I agree with that 100%. I'm with you. The problem, though, that I have is that when we get into the real world, if you start demonetizing people, if you leave it in the hands of a private corporation, if you, even short of the major policy issues, don't have actual journalists overseeing this, you are going to threaten independent media. You're going to hurt people's lives in a material sense. And people like Crowder are going to be fine because they're going to get money from oligarchs regardless.
Right. So it's not YouTube's problem. It is society's problem that's refusing to act. Let's see if they'd address this. Continue.
that comes with the territory of being a public figure, but more so because I don't want to live in a world where our discourse is policed and determined by benevolent overlords who run Silicon Valley companies, who are always going to cater to the most powerful faction. That's what happened here. YouTube caved in, not in defense of the marginalized person, but in defense of the powerful one, the one who, despite being gay and Latino, works for a major media conglomerate.
Pause it. So Steven Crowder is the marginalized one, and Maza, who's being attacked not because he works for NBC or Vox or whatever it is, but because he's gay, he's the powerful one.
I mean, you know the point he's trying to make, which is that
I don't know the point he's
well,
trying
the point.
to make.
Okay,
Totally
so let me strip. So unfortunately, and this is the problem with Greenwald going on Tucker and going into those frames,
regardless
of
of where he says this.
No, because the frame of the argument is what sets up that ridiculous conclusion, which is that
Glenn is perfectly capable
Crowder,
of changing the frame of any argument.
I like, and I'll defend Glenn in ways that I think that I agree with him on, but I think it's a major problem because I think the bigger and more typical example that you will start to see and already is.
I want to stay with this video and what he just said.
Well, there's bigger implications of it. Okay, if you just want to say, look,
continue.
Yes, Crowder's equal to, if not more powerful than Maza. I agree with that.
Of course. And the idea that this is about that Crowder's going after him because of who owns Vox is absurd. It's absurd. Because that has nothing to do with him being gay. That has nothing to do with him being Mexican. It's just absurd. It's an absurd, thing to go on anywhere and say. Never mind for Tucker Carlson, but go ahead.
Caved in, not in defense of the marginalized person, but in defense of the powerful one, the one who, despite being gay and Latino, works for a major media conglomerate. And that's what they're always going to do, is defend the mob and defend the powerful at the expense of those who are marginalized.
That is such a good point. They're defending the powerful. Really quick, I just have to ask you, so you don't... He joins us.
That is, I don't blame Tucker for laughing because that is such an unbelievable. The multimillionaire Steven Crowder is the marginalized one in this instance while he is gay bashing. Well, and look, if the argument is there is a real problem because society is not addressing YouTube, I agree with that. But the notion that somehow the powerful has been, is being catered to in this instance. It's absurd.
So, and can I take it beyond this video now?
But we agree beyond this video.
Okay, but I just want to reemphasize to people, though, that in these instances and even some of the other examples that Glenn brings up on Twitter, there are really important issues at stake that are getting wrapped up. And also, by the way, which is another thing, in my opinion, that Glenn failed to do, which is by Crowder. Crowder is polluting the water entirely. And if you're pissed about this as an independent creator, go get in his face, which is, by the way, what that documentarian has done. I'm forgetting his name. I think it's Kai Fisher. Was one of the first things he said. Sorry, what was his name? Ford Fisher said, "This is terrible. YouTube did this. By the way, ain't Carlos Maza's fault, Steven Crowder's fault."
Of course.
So, but, the more examples where that language would fit would be, as an example, what Facebook has done to Telesur, what YouTube is doing by demonetizing all these independent platforms. And if they aren't broken up, and if we don't have a broader demand, I guess my point is demand that Google do something beyond these way late in the game reactions and then overreactions. Demand they have an actual process that safeguards independent media and livelihoods, because that's a material reality too. That's all I'm trying to say.
I think a smaller YouTube could be regulated in such a way that you cannot make these assessments of terms of I mean, this is very easy regulation. You could do this. There's no political will to do it. But to go in and say, if you're going to have a terms of service, it must be assessed by human beings.
Precisely. That's beautiful. That would be so great, though, if that could be part of when people tweet at YouTube over various outrages or whatever, or even just
but
basic
you don't tweet
feedback.
That at YouTube. You tweet that at
Congress people, at lawmakers, everybody. Absolutely. And when you're talking to candidates about the specifics of their proposals.
if you really care about this issue and aren't just preening to be part of a team, frankly, then that's what you do when you go on television. That's what I just found so ridiculous about that hit, was just like, I'm just going to go on and make this about somehow, conservatives are once again targeted unfairly. I mean, look, the problem here is, first of all, that assessment is just so bizarre and misguided. It's shocking. And
he obviously has
super
strong beliefs about. Look. Also, the fact that he doesn't do that in a Brazilian context, where he and his husband's lives are literally threatened, speaks to where he's coming from on this. Agree or disagree? I think it's a very well formed and clear position, and this is also the same guy that this is the same person that is going to do the Snowden work and critique Obama when that's not fashionable and so on. So I think we also have to just be clear about where he's coming from. What he has dealt with his husband in Brazil is mind-boggling, and he still maintains that position. I wouldn't maintain that position if I was in that context. I don't think I maintain that position now, and I don't deal with any of it.
I think I could also argue that the safest place when you're afraid for stuff like that is to make sure that stuff is happening in public in some level. I mean, it's a different dynamic,
right? Maza has that opportunity.
I get that. I get that notion that he's going through, and that's why I find when he goes on to do stuff like that on Fox that much more disappointing, because it undercuts all the stuff that I think that he does that is good, frankly, because that's just the way that we live in society. I mean, I have similar laments about other people who take positions that I think are just completely indefensible, and it undercuts their credibility in areas where I think they're quite good. That's what's so upsetting about that in some respects.
I mean, look, we already live in a society where people's freedom of speech is largely determined by how much money they have, and largely determined by the pressures of the market.
Yes.
And a lot of what these people are getting mad about is not government censorship, it's the market. Like, the market is going to do what it's going to do, and sometimes that's going to be good. Sometimes people are going to say, hey, you got to do something about this homophobia. Sometimes it's going to be bad because Steven Crowder makes a ton of money for YouTube. So, I don't really see a way out of these issues in the short term. But in the long term, I have to believe if we brought YouTube and these public utilities under some form of democratic control, that they would be slightly better at ensuring a healthy discourse for everyone.
Well, and the way you do that, it seems to me, is through regulation and through disempowering them in some fashion. And, that should be, if that's the argument, that's the argument. But this idea that somehow a private company can't enforce its own terms of service, that's just absurd. You wouldn't argue that in any other context.
Well, actually, as socialists, Jamie and I would. But yes, let's get to the bigger picture argument.
Well, I'm saying, show some consistency. Just show some consistency with that. You can't get on cable television and get paid on cable television just because you have an opinion. And I just think that, I to frame it as if this is, picking on the little guy is just absurd. It's just absurd.
Oh, well, I've noticed a lot of these kind of libertarian types have this view of people who work in media as elites. Vox is currently on strike because the company refuses to give them a contract.
By the way,
these are just, they're workers. They're literally just workers. Unless you're in the David Brooks tier, which is 10 people, you're a worker. And I don't know why they think we're some secret powerful cabal, but I've heard it a lot.
Shout out to Vox employees solidarity.